Hello and welcome. My name is Charmaine Shepherd and I'm a certified functional medicine practitioner. I'm really excited to have Claire Hardie with me today, who is a specialist in fibro liver scans. So we were going to talk today a little bit about the liver scan process and just get an idea of, first of all, who should be thinking about it. And when you should be thinking about it, and a little bit more about what it is. But yes, first of all, talking about the liver, such an important organ, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not one that many people think about. It's got over 500 different functions. The main ones being things like it filters toxins out of your blood, it metabolizes fat, it stores essential proteins and vitamins, it also forms part of your immune system. But unfortunately, it's not one that's generally thought about too much unless it's in relation to alcohol. But it's got such a wide breadth, just like that's got nothing to do with alcohol. And it's the only organ in the body that can regenerate itself. So it is a pretty amazing organ.
Yeah, and I think that also means that when there are issues with it, there's a lot you can do because it has that capacity to regenerate under the right circumstances. But interesting what you said, it's got so many broad functions across so many different areas, immune system, hormones, detoxification. So I often find that when patients come and see me and they have like symptoms across lots of different systems, that's when I'm thinking liver. When you're thinking of people coming in with fibromyalgia and headaches and, a lot of symptoms that maybe go across different organ systems. But having said that, also, liver issues can often be quite silent. So, it's not always shouting out that there's a problem. You can feel relatively okay and still have issues with the liver.
Yeah, unfortunately, despite it being an amazing organ, it doesn't tend to present until the later stages in the majority of people. So everyone's heard of things like jaundice and cirrhosis.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the early stages, yeah, you're unlikely to notice that there's any deficiencies in your liver. But having the optimum liver health, I think it kind of keeps your body in equilibrium. It would be a nice summary to think about your liver.
Yeah, for sure. I think also like sometimes when people are coming in, I'm trying to think of the kind of symptoms that people will have when the liver is not quite able to do what it should be doing when it's sluggish. So, I'm just thinking of low energy. And interestingly enough, lots of research around the liver and mood. If you go and put in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and depression, you're going to find a huge connection there as well. So it does play such a big role in mood. And in men, erectile dysfunction, in women, hormone balance, thinking of skin, so liver spots, those brown spots, or dark circles under the eyes, or just skin looking a little flat and not vital. Gut issues, difficulty losing weight.
Trouble sleeping's another big one that can...
and one that's growing massively that I see a lot more in my practice now is chemical sensitivity, which of course is really classically a liver issue as well. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the FibroScan technology. Is this the same kind of ultrasound that you'd get if your GP sends you for a liver ultrasound? So say you go to the GP, maybe your liver enzymes are raised and they say, we're going to send you off for an ultrasound. Is what you do the same?
So it's slightly different to a traditional ultrasound. So it uses a different frequency of ultrasound waves. So you think about a traditional ultrasound, it tends to give you an image of something. So most people are familiar with ultrasound in terms of like pregnancy. Whereas our scan doesn't provide any image. It's what's called a shear wave followed by an ultrasound wave, and it gives me two numerical values. So one numerical value represents the percentage of fat in your liver. And the other value represents if there's any scar tissue or inflammation, which can be an indication if you're on the way to potentially having like liver cirrhosis or more serious liver issues. So that's how it would differ from a normal ultrasound that you might be referred for.
Okay, so you're going to get more information around that. And then also, is it a problem having fat on your liver?
Definitely. So if we think about it with something more common like heart disease, if your arteries are clogged with fat, you might end up having things like a heart attack or a stroke. So with your liver, if your liver cells are clogged with fat, they can't regenerate properly. And when they're trying to regenerate and can't, it can end up causing scar tissue on the liver just from being overly fatty. Now, this does take a long number of years to develop, and you need to have a fatty liver for a long time before this would take effect. But the good thing is if it's caught early, it's reversible with simple lifestyle changes. And also a lot of people who have heart attacks and strokes actually have a fatty liver. So they're all related to each other. So yeah, it's definitely a problem to have a fatty liver. It's not something that you want to have permanently.
It's interesting. I also find in a lot of my patients going through perimenopause, those who have got more liver issues actually struggle a lot more hormonally. And again, because the liver is responsible for breaking down our hormones. So not just toxins, but also a lot of hormones and metabolites and things like that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of additional factors that can influence your liver. And when it's got a problem with one thing, it might stem off a lot of other options. One example is like people with type 2 diabetes are much more at risk of having a fatty liver. So yeah, it's all connected to each other.
Absolutely. So I find that the liver is one of the organs that is able to regenerate, like you said earlier. And I'm curious about, what you've seen in practice, whether people are actually able to, make any changes that can have an impact on the liver. So, if you scan somebody and you find they have an element of a fatty liver, do you find that there are things that they can do that's actually going to make a measurable difference?
Yeah, definitely. So normally, if somebody has a fatty liver, we have a discussion with them about their lifestyle in terms of diet, exercise, and alcohol. So a recent example was a youngish male, he was under 50, who came in. He'd had like an annual health check with his GP, and his liver enzymes were slightly off while everything else was within the normal ranges. So he decided to book on and have a LiverScan examination. And that showed that despite what he thought was a kind of relatively healthy lifestyle, he's a teetotaler, so he'd never considered his liver, he was in the highest fat bracket for liver, which means that he had over 60% fat on his liver. So that was quite a shock to him. So once we broke down his lifestyle a bit, we worked out that he could increase his exercise a bit more to get his heart rate up, to bring on a sweat. So while he did go out walking, he probably didn't walk quick enough to break a sweat. And also he could reduce the amount of like snacks that he had. So he went away and he had quite a high carb diet. He just tried intermittent fasting. So he did 3 months worth of intermittent fasting. He lost 8 kilos over a 3-month period. And he also increased the amount of walking that he did. And he came back for a second FibroScan, and he'd gone from that high fat bracket with over 60% fat to the lowest fat bracket, which meant that he had less than 10% fat on his liver. And that was in a short 3-month period.
Quite incredible. And I find a lot of my patients now are more thinking about, rather than waiting until something breaks. Waiting until you have heart disease or waiting until you have full-blown liver disease, is to be more proactive about, looking at these things and actually making changes earlier in their life. So a lot of my patient group is interested in health span, not just lifespan. Not just, am I going to live till 88 or 90, but am I going to live those years well? And I think this is where this kind of thing really comes into play, because it's, early intervention with really positive things like lifestyle changes and things that can then mean that the last 15, 20 years of your life is spent in really good health rather than sitting with multiple conditions. Because as you said, once one condition develops, you're more likely to develop another and another, especially because the role of the liver is so important. You can set yourself onto a completely different health trajectory just by being more proactive about it.
Definitely. And I think prevention is better than cure any day of the week. And the fact that you don't need to do anything drastic, it's simple, small, sustainable lifestyle changes over an extended period of time that will give you that better quality of life.
I agree. Just coming back to this chap that you're talking about, if you didn't have that information, potentially 5 or 10 years down the line with progressively more of a fatty liver developing, that could have led to a more serious situation. Whereas now he's really set himself onto a completely different path, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I think his wife is delighted that she encouraged him to get back on the annual medical path after having a break during COVID and kind of going off, not off the rails, I would say, but, not following his normal routine and never getting back to it. So at least it's given him that challenge too, and that motivation to get back on track.
And also, probably a good time to mention that we are running a 4-week program where we focus on helping people really optimize liver health. And this includes having 2 liver scans, so one before and then one at the end of the program, and also some blood work to look at liver enzymes. And during that program, we really take people through a process of looking at all the things that they can do in terms of optimizing gut health, optimizing insulin, looking at fasting, looking at exercise. So really positive things. But I think the really powerful thing about this workshop is that we also have an element of health coaching in, because let me put this question to you, Claire. Is exercise good for you?
Yes, definitely.
And if I ask this question in a room of 80 people, I'll say, hands up if you think exercise is good. I can guarantee everybody will put their hands up, because we all know it. We all know the stuff. But it is, how do you day in and day out implement this? Or how do you start to make changes that go from not just knowing something's good for you, but how do you implement those habits? Because we all have the best intentions. We all wake up on New Year's Day and say, this year I'm going to get fit. Or this year I'm going to do this or that. But it's really, I think, a process whereby you build small habits on top of each other, so that, like you said earlier, these are habits that become sustainable and that are there for a lifetime, rather than a crash and burn. I'm going to start a big exercise program and then 2 weeks later it all collapses. So that's the really powerful thing about the program as well, is that there is a coaching element to it, and it's helping people to find ways and techniques to make to make it easier to implement.
Yeah, I think having the health coaching is essential, because, as you say, everybody knows what to do, but it's actually implementing them that is the challenge, and making sure that it isn't just that first 2 weeks when they leave the door after having their bloods or their FibroScan, and it's a continued effort.
Definitely. And then also there are some things that people won't be necessarily aware of. We're all aware of exercising, and most people are aware of fasting as well. But there are some interesting things that we'll look at in terms of your gut microbiome, the type of bacteria that grows in the gut and how that actually impacts on the liver. And then also look at things like one thing that always is for me such a really powerful thing to look at is the basic nutrients that the liver needs to function. And I'm actually going to share my screen here because this is one that's really worth looking at. This is an image from the Institute of Functional Medicine, and it really looks at what the basic nutrients are that the liver needs in order to detoxify. So we're not only talking about the detoxification part of the liver. Like you said earlier, the liver has got lots of other functions. But to, basically to move a toxin, and I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but to go through all these detoxification pathways, in that first phase, the body's needing vitamin B2, 3, B6, B9, B12, glutathione, flavonoids, phospholipids, and then it comes into this intermediate phase where your antioxidants become really important, vitamin A, C, E, selenium, copper, zinc, manganese, coenzyme Q10, and then we move to phase 2, the second part of that detoxification process. And here your amino acids and your proteins become really important. Glycine, taurine, glutamine, all of that. So, also thinking about when you're eating or the nutrients that you're taking in, are you actually getting in enough of what you need for the liver to detoxify? So, there's lots of interesting things that we'll go through. I think very often, we also, and I don't know if you've seen this in practice, sometimes you have people coming in and they're doing all the right things. They're like, I don't drink, I fast, I am on a low carb diet, and there's still issues coming up with liver. So that's when we start looking at things like, what's your gut microbiome like, or have you got deficiencies of some really key nutrients and things like that. So I think it's a fantastic program. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I am too, and I think it'll be, I'm always learning new things about the liver. I've only been in the liver space for the last 12 months, so every day is a learning curve for me as well. So it's not just for the clients. I think I'll learn a lot from it too.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been really good to connect today.
You're welcome, and I can't wait for the program to start in September.